Where are my glasses? Hey guys, so today we are going to go again with one of the topics I have to cover for my exams, which is going to be the animal welfare and the 3R principle in the lab animal model. And if this topic interests you, you can join me and we can study together. We're gonna study today for 2 hours. It's already 10. I'm late, kind of, because I was lazy. It was this Sunday, and I was like, okay, I'll just get up a little late. So today we're gonna start doing our work on animal welfare and the 3Rs. So let's go. With that, I have my breakfast too, and today I'm having 2 boiled eggs and chocolate milk. Okay, the first topic, the topic is the main topic is the animal welfare and the 3Rs, but the subtopic is the sentience. So everybody, like, maybe I didn't know, but before, like, what is sentience? But it is like the ability to feel anything, perceive and experience subjectively to anything, and it is very important for when you're working in the lab that the models, the animal models you're treating, that should feel sentience. And so this is the ability to feel, perceive and experience subjectively, ability to think, reason. So it's difficult to prove in animals that if they go through this or not, but that is there, and that is why in whole Europe it is necessary actually for people to treat, not people, like actually the lab people, the researchers, to treat the animals as sentient, you know, and that is why in European Union 1997 law, the animals are seen as sentient beings. That means are aware of their own surroundings, of what is happening to them, bodily sensations they have, and their relationship with other animals, and have an emotional dimension and the ability to learn from the experience. So if you remember, like before we talked about this, that if you're treating an animal and the behavior changes, there's like a fear or anything else, that means the animal is perceiving something that they are able to think, they're able to feel, obviously, because they are living beings. So that is why in European Union there is a law. So they have emotional dimensions and ability to learn from their past experiences. You have to, if the experience is really bad and you did like really, like how do you say, like an experiment on the animal which was really harmful or painful, or it was like a longing journey injury, sorry, so that means like you have to end that experiment right away because the animal is actually feeling that emotion and cannot you cannot continue the experiment with that same animal model. Okay, so we have the European Union 1997 law, and animals are seen as sentient beings, where animals are seen as sentient beings, are aware of their own surroundings, of what is happening to them, bodily sensations they have, like pain, then hunger and cold, and their relationship with other animal is there. And we have an emotional dimension and the ability to learn from experience, can make a choice between different animals, objects, and situations. Then we have the animal welfare. Okay, so animal welfare is the measure of health, growth, and productivity. Okay, and the feeling are the measures of affective states. Oh, that's a perfect boiled egg. It's runny, and I like runny yolk, by the way. Too much salt. Measures of health, growth, and productivity. Then we have the feeling. Measures of affective states like suffering and contentment. So you have to measure whenever you're working in a lab with an animal model. You have to figure out and also measure the function of the functional behavior of the animal, the feelings of the animal. Like you have to measure the what feelings, you know, if you ask like what feelings, like the suffering and the contentment to anything, it's gonna be feelings for the animals you're using in the lab. So you have to be very careful whenever you're dealing with the animal in the lab. Then the natural behavior is very important, like if the animal is mating properly, if the animal is eating properly, sleeping on the time. So that's all the behaviors you have to keep in mind, and like have like readings for that. You have to measure all of that. Then we have the concept of five. F5s. So there are like the F5 are like 5 rules, major rules you have to look up and fulfill when you're dealing with an animal in the lab. The factors to consider are species-specific issue. So it depends on which type of species we're using. So that particular species has different issue. Like albino mouse will have different issues, and a normal mouse will have different issues. Differences between the sexes or the strains. The female will, maybe because it is going through a lot and the hormonal changes are really fast in the female, so it's gonna be different for females and it's gonna be different for males. And or strain, if you're using like a gerbil, some kind of gerbil, like Syrian gerbil or something like that, or Syrian rodent or something like that, it's gonna be different for that. And then if there's there's an animal which is from another region of the world, then it's gonna feel different, and the parameters to measure in that animal will be particularly different. So you have to be very what do you say? Yeah, you have to be very considerate. Yes, you have to be very considerate when considering the factors. The factors to be considered is species-specific issues, differences between the sexes or the strains, and learning processes. Now comes the habituation. What is habituation? Repeated exposure to a harmless stimulus or a stimulus without feedback results in a decreased response to said stimulus. Okay, sorry, what? Habituation is the repeated exposure to a harmless stimulus, okay, or a stimulus without feedback results in a decreased response to said stimulus. Disregard unimportant stimuli to save energy is essential for animal welfare and standardization of research and acclimation to new housing. Yeah, so if you're moving the animals from one facility to another facility, by facility I am referring to a lab. So if you're working in a lab and you're transporting your animal from one lab to another, that means you're transferring your animals from one facility to another facility, and that means like there is going to be a habituation kind of going on. So repeated exposure to harmless stimulus. Now moving an animal is harmless, right, from one facility to another, because you're not performing any experiment currently on that animal. So that means like habituation is repeated exposure of harmless stimulus, so or stimulus without any feedback. So when you are transporting a certain animal that doesn't have like a feedback, negative or positive, so that means that comes in the habituation, and it results in the decreased response to such stimulus. Now, the best example for this is the acclimation to new housing facilities after transport include a quarantine. Then we have the new cage, husbandry, and environmental room, repeated handling, restraining, and intervention. That means like when you are transferring one individual or animal from one facility to another, then you have to make sure that there is a gap between like there's a gap of 7 to 8 days, or it depends on different species, like which species you are how do you say, like which species you're working with. It depends on that. So you have to keep them in quarantine, or you have to keep them in new cages for a specific period of time, so that they can relax, they can calm, and then you can start working on them, or transport them back to the actual cage they're gonna be in. So yeah, or the place, not the cage. Maybe for some specific animals there is gonna be a cage, but for some specific animals there's not gonna be a cage, but like a facility or a room you can put the animal in. And then we have sensitization. Sensitization is exposure to threatening situations result in different or faster response to harmless stimulus. Now for this particular thing, you have an example of like if you if you handle an animal and you're trying to, and then before, what you do is you just go and there's like a table in the lab, and then you put the animal, whatever animal is, it's rodent, rabbit, whatever, you take the animal and then you start performing directly. It's gonna be like the animal is gonna be like, it's gonna be freaked out. So to minimize that, what you do is like you repeat the procedure 1-2 times, so the animals know like, okay, something is not that bad, I can be there, and then the animal will calm down a little bit, and then you perform the experiment. It's not like you just go and then perform the experiment right away and that animal will freak out, obviously. The sensitization, exposure to a threatening situation results in a different or faster response to a harmless stimulus. And then an animal being placed on an exam table followed by injection, stress or pain, animal will be nervous and animal will be like nervous and then anxious to the next time it is placed on the same table. Then maximize the habituation, acclimation efforts. Avoid, reduce stress, experience, and calm researcher results in more efficient work. Now that is why you need an experienced worker in the lab to handle the animals before even the experiment is done, because you have to make sure the animal is calmed down and you're working with an animal which is that's not under stress. Okay, 5 freedom domains. Now we have the 5 freedom domains: freedom of hunger or thirst. Nutrition, giving sufficient, balanced, varied, and clean food and water to the animal is very it's equally what do you say, like important as for your animal to behave in a certain way. If you want like a animal to behave in a certain way when you infect the animal or like use the animal for a certain experiment and then you give a drug and you want that drug to behave in a certain way, then you have to make sure that the parameters, the food you're giving, the water you're giving, the facility is clean, the animal is not under stress. So it's gonna be a lot before it takes a lot of factors when you're dealing with animals in a facility, in a lab. So you have to consider everything, and that is why you need different certifications, licenses, and everybody cannot do it because it's on the different researchers and technicians and experienced people that they do a certain type of protocol to handle the animals used in the lab. So the freedom of hunger and thirst is there, and then nutrition, giving the sufficient, balanced, varied, and clean food and water every time. And then you have to daily check it, it's required by law. And then they have adapted feeding, drinking schedules for experimental purposes. If the animal is not, you just gave the best food, whatever possible, and then animal is not responding to that particular food, then what you're gonna do? So that is why you have to keep a daily check. How much food the animal is consuming. Is animal getting obese, or is animal losing body weight, or is animal shedding certain amount of hair or scales or whatever is there on the skin, or is animal not liking the food? Is it palatable for animal or not? So there's a lot of factors goes in the freedom of hunger and thirst in the lab animals you're using. Okay, so the next comes the freedom of discomfort. So the environment. If there's a facility, a lab, I mean to say, there's a lab and there's so much noise in the lab, the animal is gonna get discomfort. If you are just coming, there's so much light in the lab, sunlight, or there is a different type of whatever lighting you're using. So animal is gonna get stressed out, and it's not gonna perform in a certain way you want it to perform. So, but freedom from discomfort is very important, and it directly depends on the environment. And the comfort comes from the temperature, the substrate, the air, the space, the odor, the noise, and the predictability. So all these factors are very important when you're dealing with animals. Appropriate housing conditions, relative humidity 45 to 65%, temperature is going to be species specific, light intensity and light dark cycle, noise, bedding, nesting material, air circulation, everything. Sanitation schedule and alarm system for automated systems, daily check required by the law, freedom from pain, injury and disease, health, enabling good health through the absence of disease, injury and impairment. Okay, now there's the next freedom of 5, the freedom of 5 freedom domains. First was freedom from hunger, freedom from pain, and now freedom from freedom from discomfort, and now freedom from pain. Injury and disease, pain, injury and disease. So health is going to be very important in animals' life, enabling good health through the absence of disease, injury and impairment, with a good fitness level, prevention, appropriate housing conditions, daily check on animal health, training, education of personnel, and regular health monitoring of the trafficking, both of the animals and the personnel's quarantine. Then we have rapid diagnosis and treatment. Then comes the freedom to express normal behavior. Behavior is very important. If the animal is not showing the normal behavior, that means the animal is not well, and you have to discontinue the experiment right away. Providing varied, novel, and engaging enrichment through sensory inputs, exploration, social interactions with the congeners. I don't know how to pronounce this word. It's very dumb. Some of the words are like literally so very difficult actually to pronounce.
Congeners.
So it's congeners. Social interaction with the congeners, animals of the same species. Group housing is obligatory for social animals. If there is a social animal that you know that, okay, this animal interacts a lot, then you have to give a social housing to that animal. But if you know that because of the social housing it's gonna get aggressive, then you have to think, okay, this much number of animals can be accommodated in this much area. So there are a lot of other factors going in the social housing. Social interactions with the congeners. Group housing is obligatory for social animals. Breeding groups or groups comprised of only females or males. Exception only possible when thoroughly motivated and approved by the ethics committee. If you want to keep an animal out of a social group, or kind of desocialize him, kind of, or put him like in a single room and then nobody's there, then it's going to be very stressful for that animal, and the animal is not going to perform the way you want it to perform. So exceptions only possible when thoroughly motivated and approved by the ethics committee. Metabolic age is very important. Behavioral experiment. Brief isolation after surgery. Adhere to maximum group size per surface. Depends on the animal species and the age and the weight. Overcrowding results in stress. Appropriate housing to allow for species specific behavior. Climbing, digging new nest building. For example, typical mouse behavior is there: resting, grooming, and hiding, gnawing, searching for food, exploration. So it is very important. All these factors are very important for animals. Adhere to maximum group size per surface. Appropriate housing to animals for species specific behavior. Okay. Then we have types of enrichment: social enrichment, contact enrichment, group pair housing, improves recovery after surgery, non-contact enrichment, visual, auditory, or olfactory communications. Now there are two types of enrichments. There's social enrichment and there's physical enrichment. Social enrichment means that contact enrichment, group or pair housing is important. So it comes in enrichment, improves the recovery after surgery. If there are a lot of people like animals, then they're gonna cheer you up, and you're like okay, I'm not alone. So it's gonna improve the recovery after the surgery. Non-contact enrichment is the visual, auditory, or olfactory communication. Okay, so if you want to keep an animal isolated, then it's gonna be a visual, auditory, or olfactory communication. Then we have the physical enrichment: complexity in enclosure, nesting material obligatory for breeding, sensory enrichment: visual, auditory, olfactory, tactile, and taste stimuli, and nutritional enrichment. However, accounts for experimental restrictions or standardization. Freedom from fear and distress. Mental state should be very, very good when you're dealing with animal. The animal should benefit from predominantly positive states while reducing negative states. Relationship between the distress, adaptive capacity, and the animal welfare. Animals' quality of life may be progressively deteriorating while it is still successfully coping up with the stressors. Precise moments of transition to male adaptive state. Once this tipping point is attained, then deterioration. It's not male adaptive; it's maladaptive state. Once this tipping point is attained, the deterioration. The Swahili it's thick, or the Delibated, something like that. Animal occurs fairly quickly. Immediate, ameliorative action. What is ameliorative? These words are really, literally so complicated. Why don't they use like a just simple word? It should make sense. It's not like we're giving the attention to students like what does it even mean? Ameliorative is adjective, describes action processes or effects that improve a situation, making it better, more satisfactory, or less swear. Just use like less swear or something like that. Why do you want to use like immediate ameliorative? How I'm gonna put that in my mind? Stupid. Okay, stress. Normal reaction to changing environment allows for adaptation and the activation of the learning process. So psychological alterations are there, like changes in the autonomous nervous system or neuroendocrine system. Then you have the behavioral alterations, acute stress, conflict behavior, short and exaggerated, agonistic behavior, aggression, escape, animal is hindered in reaching its goal, aggression towards. Okay, so there could be like behavioral alterations when there is a stress, and then short and exaggerated could be, or conflict behavior, because if there are like different group of animals together, then they can have a conflict for territory and stuff like that. Ambivalent behavior, tendency to approach and avoid a target situation at the same point, at the same time, circular movement around the target. Okay, then we have the redirected behavior. When the animal cannot reach the target or fear it, animals can redirect itself towards the replacement object. Then we have the adjunctive behavior, apparently little or no relationship to the conflict, possibly signal to congeners. Chronic stress, if there is a stress, there's different, but if there's a chronic stress, that means like stereotypes or the pathological behavior, possibly causing harm to the animal itself or the congeners, popping, explosive, episodic, jumping behavior. Okay, and then we have the barbering, whiskers and fur plucking, and then finger biting. They're all the very chronic stress behaviors in animals, and if you see that, then you have to obviously use the ameliorative impact should be there. Control and predictability reduce stress. Relevance of stress related behavior, ethical and scientific. Decrease in animal welfare, poor housing and animal care conditions, health issues, obligation to adhere to the ethical demand, violation of the 3 R's. Scientific. Psychological and behavioral alterations could interfere with the experimental outcome, result in unwanted bias and variability. Pain and welfare assessment. That's the next topic. Then we have the measure of animal welfare in experiment. I think I'm gonna do like till page 50 complete, I guess. Sentience, ability to feel, perceive, experience, subjectively, ability to think, reason. It is difficult to prove an animal, but can be deducted through observations. To use emotions, empathy, and personality. European Union 1997. Animals are seen as sentient beings, are aware of their own surroundings, of what is happening to them, bodily sensations like pain, hunger, and cold, and their relationship with other animals have an emotional dimension, and the ability to learn from the experiences, can make a choice between different animals, objects, and situations. Okay, so again, the sentience is what? Ability to feel, perceive, experience subjectively. Ability to think and reason is difficult to prove in animals, but can be deducted through observations. Like the two you're using, the emotions they're showing, the empathy, and the personality. European Union 1997, they made a law. Animals are seen as sentient beings, are aware of their own surrounding, of what is happening to them, bodily sensations they have, and their relationship with other animals. Have an emotional dimension, have an emotional behavior, have an emotional dimension and the ability to learn from the experiences. Have an emotional dimension. That means like animals have the emotional feeling that they go through for a certain period, and and they feel whatever they're going through. That means like emotional, they have like emotional dimension and the ability to learn from the experiences. Can make a choice between different animal, object, and situations, and they can make a choice between different animals, objects, and situations they want to be in or they want to interact with. So it's not like you're gonna put the animal anywhere and start doing an experiment. That's not how it works in the lab. So what we learn from sentience is that animals are considered, it is the ability to feel, think, and then we have the feel, think, and then experience subjectively and perceive things, right? And it is difficult to prove in animals, but can be measured differently. And like the use of tools you're using, the interaction they have with other animals, the sensation, the bodily sensations they have, and the relationship with other animals. And then we have that they have an emotional dimension. That means they feel, and then ability to learn from the experiences, can make choices between different animals, objects, and situations. Then we have animal welfare. What does that do? It has a function, feeling, and natural behavior. And according to animal welfare function, measure of the health, growth, and reproductivity, you have to, according to the animal welfare, you have to keep a record, a measure of their health, growth, and productivity. Then you have a record and measure of feelings, measure of affective states like suffering or contentment. Then we have the natural behavior. We have to have a measure of quantitative and qualitative comparisons to wide and free conspecifics. Okay, then we have the concept of 5 F's, factors to consider. Species-specific issue. We have species-specific issue, differences between the sexes or the strains. Then we have the learning processes. Habituation, repeated exposure to harmless stimulus or a stimulus without the feedback. Is it either it's going to be a negative feedback or a positive feedback, but there is no feedback. So habituation is the repeated exposure to painless stimulus or harmless stimulus, not painless but harmless stimulus, or stimulus without feedback results in a decreased response to said stimulus. Okay, what is habituation? It's a constant exposure or continued exposure to a harmless stimulus, and or a stimulus that doesn't have a feedback, either positive or negative. Yes, and then but it results in a decreased response to said stimulus. What does that mean? Like, it results in decreased response to said stimulus. To said stimulus, what is a stimulus? Stimulus is actually harmless, so obviously there's going to be no response to anything. Whatever. So disregard unimportant stimuli to save energy. Disregard unimportant stimuli to save energy. So if there are different stimuli, you are going to, the animal is going to be, how do you say, like, animal is going to be exposed. Then you have to disregard the unimportant stimuli to save your energy and animal's energy as well. Then is essential for animal welfare and standardization of the research. But it is essential, okay? It is essential to consider the habituation and then acclimatization of the process. So that means you have to be very specific when you're handling with the lab animals. It's essential for animal welfare and standardization of the research. For example, acclimatization to new housing facilities after transport, including quarantine, new cage, husbandry, and experimental rooms. So it is very important. Then we have sensitization. Sensitization is exposure to a threatening situation. You're exposing an animal to a threatening situation, results in a different or faster response to a harmless stimulus. Okay, what does this say? Like, exposure to threatening situation results in a different or faster response to a harmless stimulus. For example, an animal being placed on the exam table, followed by the injection, stress, or pain, negative experience. Animal will be nervous, anxious the next time it is placed on the same table. Minimize the habituation. Acclimatization efforts. Avoid, reduce the stress. Experience and calm researcher results in more efficient work. Okay. Sensitization, what does it do? It actually maximizes the habituation acclimatization efforts. So what is sensitization? Exposure to a threatening situation results in a different or faster response to a harmless stimulus. For example, an animal is placed on an exam table, followed by an injection, stress or pain, negative experience they feel. Animal will be nervous or anxious the next time it is placed on the same table. Okay, 5 freedom domains: freedom from hunger or thirst, nutrition, giving sufficient, balanced, varied, and clean food and water to the animal. Daily check is required by the law, and adapted feeding, drinking schedules for experimental purposes. Follow-ups on the body weight, predefine a maximum percentage of weight loss that is allowed. Then we have the freedom of discomfort, environment, comfort through temperatures, substrate, space, air, odor, noise, and the predictability. The first was one from the freedom of hunger, and freedom from hunger. This is freedom from discomfort, which comes from environment. Comfort through the temperature, substrate, space, air, odor, noise, and predictability. Appropriate housing conditions. You need an appropriate housing condition for the freedom of discomfort. Relative humidity, 45 to 65% temperature should be there. Light intensity, could be light cycle, dark cycle, you can choose between that. Then you have noise, it should not be that noisy, or it should not be pin drop silence either. It's going to stress out the animal. Then we have the bedding material and the nesting materials should be provided to the animals so they form really well. Then we have the air circulation. There should be a ventilation system, because it is important for the animals, but it's also important for the disease not to be persistent over there. There's going to be a disease outbreak in the facility, and you cannot just handle like that. So you have to be very, very considerate or very active about the ventilation process. That is why we have different facilities of different designs for our labs. It is not like you see every lab in one design. It's different. For every lab, there's a different design. Okay, freedom from pain, injury, and disease, which is health, enabling good health through the absence of disease, injury, and impairment with a good fitness level. Freedom from pain, injury, and distress or disease. So you have to control the health, not control, but keep a record of the health, enabling good health through the absence of disease. As I just mentioned, like there should be no disease. So if the ventilation is good, if the diet is good, if there's no stress or pain, then it's gonna be no disease, hopefully. Then there is no injury. There should be no injury. And impairment with a good fitness level. Then we have the prevention, appropriate housing conditions, daily check on animal health, training, education of the personnel, regular health monitoring of the trafficking, both of the animals and the personnel. Then we have the quarantine, rapid diagnosis and treatment, prevention, appropriate housing conditions. We have different conditions, daily check on animal health, training, education of personnel, regular health monitoring of trafficking, and rapid diagnosis and treatment. It's over, guys. I think I'm gonna do the rest offline and then come back.